"You'll pay for Chloe's college. If you don't come back home." Those were the first words my mother said to me on my graduation day. No congratulations, no pride. Just a quiet threat slipped between applause and camera flashes sharp enough to slice through the moment I'd worked years for. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I just stood there gripping the edge of my gown while the crowd celebrated behind us, unaware that my future had been rewritten in a single sentence. What my mother didn't know was this: I'd already discovered something earlier that morning, something she never meant for me to hear. Before that graduation day, before the threat whispered between applause and camera flashes, my life had been carved by a quieter kind of erasure, one that began long before I turned 18. When I was 10, my world still had color. My father Daniel would wake me before sunrise, tapping lightly on my door so we wouldn't disturb anyone. We'd ride our bikes through the neighborhood, the morning air sharp and clean, our wheels humming in sync. He coached me through my track meets, shouting my name across the field, his voice cutting through every cheer. Back then I ran because he believed I could fly. When he died, everything slowed. The house grew quieter, not with grief, but with a kind of reshaping. My mother Evelyn began smoothing over pieces of me she didn't like. She replaced my running shoes with ballet flats, my jerseys with dresses, my medals with makeup kits I never asked for. "Girls your age don't need all that running," she'd say, tugging at my hair while avoiding my reflection in the mirror. At first I thought it was grief misdirected. Then it became a pattern. 3 years later, she remarried. Thomas came with tidy smiles and a daughter, Chloe, 9 years old, pretty delicate and everything my mother wished I were. She arrived carrying pink suitcases, lace dresses, and a soft voice she used only in front of adults. The moment they left the room, the softness vanished. She hid my homework the night before a major test. She poured nail polish over my favorite track jersey. She unplugged my alarm so I'd wake up late for school. Every time I tried to speak up, Evelyn dismissed it with a tired sigh. "She's younger than you, Harper. Stop exaggerating." Thomas nodded like that settled everything. One morning, after Chloe locked the bathroom for almost an hour, I had to wash my face in the kitchen sink while Evelyn scolded me for making a scene. Each small humiliation piled on top of the last, shaping me into something quiet, something careful, something she could ignore without guilt. By high school, I learned to stop asking for anything. I worked late at the library to save money. I did my own research on scholarships. I kept my grades high so no one could say I wasn't trying. Most days, I walked straight to my grandmother Lorraine's house after school. It was only a few blocks away, but it felt like a different world, warm light, through lace curtains, the smell of coffee, her soft humming as she knitted. She looked at me the way no one else in that house ever did. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" I always said yes. She always knew I wasn't. The morning of my graduation, I went by her place before heading to campus. I needed a quiet moment, a breath. While I poured us both tea, she stepped away to answer a phone call. I hadn't meant to overhear, but the hallway was narrow and her voice wasn't loud enough to drown out my mother's. Evelyn wasn't congratulating anyone. She wasn't talking about my future. She was talking about hers. "Just a little longer," she said sharply. "Once Mother's gone, the house is mine. Chloe will finally have the life she deserves. Harper. She'll be fine. She always lands somewhere." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Because in that moment I understood exactly where I stood in her plans and why she needed me silent. By the time I reached campus that afternoon, the phone call I'd overheard at Grandma Lorraine's house had already carved a quiet hollow inside me. I tried to shake it off. After all, it was my graduation day, the one milestone I had earned entirely on my own. But Evelyn's voice lingered like a shadow behind my shoulder. "Once Mother's gone, the house is mine. Chloe will finally have the life she deserves. Harper. She'll be fine. She always lands somewhere. Somewhere. Not home. Not with her. Just somewhere." I carried those words with me as the ceremony unfolded through the speeches, the cheers, the staged smiles. When they called my name, I walked across the stage feeling both seen and invisible at the same time. The crowd clapped, but the sound felt distant, filtered through the memory of that phone call. Afterward, I found Evelyn waiting near the steps, arms crossed, as if the celebration were an inconvenience. Her eyes didn't soften when she saw me. They rarely did. "You'll pay for Chloe's college," she murmured, barely moving her lips. "If you don't come back home." It wasn't anger in her voice. It wasn't disappointment. It was efficiency, like she was giving me a list of errands, a task, a duty. And in that moment, everything aligned. The years of being dismissed, the mornings of sabotaged alarms, the way Chloe was always protected even from consequences she earned, the way I was expected to carry burdens that were never mine. But now, there was more a truth spoken in that hallway just hours earlier. She wasn't planning for my future. She was planning after me, planning a life where I didn't exist in her home at all. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't remind her of the money I had saved, the scholarships I fought for, the life I was trying to build. I simply nodded once and stepped back, watching her attention drift past me toward the crowd, toward Thomas, toward Chloe, toward the life she had already chosen. The threat she gave me at graduation wasn't the real wound. The real wound was realizing she had erased me long before that day. I didn't cry after she said it. I didn't chase her across the lawn or demand an explanation. Instead, I stepped away from the crowd and walked toward the far edge of the campus where the noise thinned out, where the wind carried only the faint echo of applause. My robe brushed against my ankles with every step, a reminder of everything I had earned and everything she had reduced to a transaction. I sat beneath a tall oak tree, the sun drifting behind its branches. Students rushed past me, wrapped in joy and family and celebration. But I sat alone, hands still trembling from the sentence that had rewritten my place in Evelyn's home. "Once Mother's gone, the house is mine." Those words, the ones I'd overheard that morning, pressed harder on my chest than the threat she'd given me at graduation. She hadn't just planned her life without me. She had planned her future on top of me. And suddenly I understood something with startling clarity. Silence, my silence, had always been her greatest asset. Not today. I reached for my phone. Grandma Lorraine answered on the second ring. "Harper, is everything all right, darling?" Her voice was calm, rooted, the kind that held you steady. It was enough to crack something inside me, something that had been held tight for years. "Can I come over?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Now." "Of course," she said. "The kettle's already on." I walked off campus without saying goodbye to anyone. The sun was warm on my skin, but inside everything felt cold, clean, sharp, ready. Her house looked the same, as it always did, small, warm, safe. The kind of place where winter light falls softly across the kitchen counter. When I stepped inside, the smell of chamomile tea wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't realized I needed. She took one look at my face and didn't ask what happened. "Sit," she said gently. "Start from wherever you can." I told her everything. Slowly at first, then steadier, like I'd been rehearsing the sentences for years. The dresses, the nail polish, the alarms, the quiet favoritism, the morning phone call, the threat at graduation. She didn't interrupt once. Her hands stayed folded on the table, eyes soft but unshaken. When I finished, she reached across and squeezed my wrist. "Harper," she said quietly. "I heard that call. Every word." I froze. "You what?" She didn't know the line was open, Grandma said with a sigh. She slipped. I heard her say exactly what you heard. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something like validation. Proof. I had not imagined it. I had not exaggerated. I had not been dramatic. "Come with me," she said. She rose from the table and walked to her bedroom. I followed, unsure of what she intended. She opened a low drawer, reached inside, and pulled out a neat stack of documents, contracts, savings records, property paperwork. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. Just the truth. "This house," she said, laying her palm flat on the top page, "is in my name. It always has been. And she knows that. That's why she's been circling me like a vulture. That's why she wants you out, so she doesn't have to share a future with someone she can't control." My breath hitched. Grandma continued, her voice steady. "I'm old Harper, old enough to have seen people reveal who they are when they think no one is watching. And today," she revealed herself. A beat. But she forgot one thing. She looked up at me. "I am watching." Then she set the papers down in front of me. "We're going to fix this," she said, quietly, cleanly, properly. She reached for her phone and dialed her attorney, an old friend from the city. Her tone stayed light, almost conversational, as she requested an appointment for the next morning. "Paperwork transfer," she said simply. "And a will update." My heart stumbled. "Grandma." She shook her head before I could protest. "I'm not doing this because she hurt you," she said softly. "I'm doing this because you've survived more than she ever saw. You've built your life alone, and you never once asked me for anything." Her gaze hardened, not unkindly, but decisively. "This house should go to the person who knows the value of a home." I swallowed hard, unable to speak. The plan formed itself quietly, without theatrics. Tomorrow morning, we would go to the notary. She would transfer the house into my name. She would revise her will, and Evelyn would lose the one thing she believed was guaranteed. Not because of a fight, not because of revenge, but because she drew the map of her own downfall long before I ever realized I was standing on it. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the small guest room at Grandma's house, listening to the soft clinking of her teacups in the kitchen as she prepared for the next day. There were no raised voices, no dramatics, no pleas. Just quiet, cold, steady. Silence finally on my terms. Tomorrow, Evelyn's terms would end. The next morning, the sky was a muted gray, the kind that makes everything feel slower, quieter, inevitable. Grandma Lorraine and I drove in silence to the notary's office. The documents she carried were tucked neatly into a leather folder on her lap, her fingers resting over them like she was guarding something fragile. But her posture was steady. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't second-guessing. She was ready. Inside the office, the air smelled like paper and old carpet. A clock ticked steadily on the wall. The attorney, a man in his 70s with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted her with a soft smile. "Lorraine," he said. "It's been a while." "Yes," she replied calmly. "It's time." The signing process wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, no gasps, just signatures, notary seals, the scratch of pens against paper. Line after line, she transferred her house into my name. Then she updated her will, requesting everything be left to me when the time came. Savings, bonds, the rest of her small estate. The attorney asked if she was certain. "I'm old," she said with a small shrug. "Certainty is all I have left." When it was done, she closed the folder, handed it to me, and rose from her chair. "Let's go home," she said. Not her home, not Evelyn's home, my home. The drive back felt different, not lighter, just clearer, as if the fog that had blurred the edges of my life for years had finally lifted. When we pulled into the driveway, Evelyn's car was already there. She was standing on the porch with Thomas and Chloe, arms folded, jaw tight. She must have guessed something. Grandma stepped out of the car first. I followed, holding the folder close to my chest. "What is this?" Evelyn demanded, her voice sharp and high. "Why didn't you come home last night, and where were you this morning?" Grandma climbed the porch steps at her own pace, unfazed. "I was handling paperwork," she said. Evelyn blinked. Paperwork for what Grandma looked her daughter directly in the eyes, something she rarely did. "For the house." Thomas's expression faltered. Chloe's smirk disappeared. "What about the house?" Evelyn asked, her voice wavering for the first time. "It's no longer yours to assume," Grandma answered. She reached into the folder, pulled out the notarized deed, and held it out not to Evelyn, but to me. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Evelyn snatched the paper and scanned it, her face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "No, this must be wrong. This house is supposed to go to me." "You said I said nothing," Grandma replied calmly. "You assumed." "This is insane," Evelyn shouted. "You're giving my future away to her." She jabbed a finger at me as if I were a stranger intruding on her driveway. "She is your daughter," Grandma said quietly. "Something you seem to have forgotten." Thomas stepped forward. "Lorraine, don't you think you should reconsider?" Think about Chloe's needs. I have Grandma cut in. For years. Evelyn's breathing grew frantic. You can't do this. You can't just throw us out. Grandma raised a hand, silencing her. You have 1 hour. The words dropped like stones. No anger, no tremble, just a consequence arriving exactly on time. 1 hour to gather your things and leave this house, Grandma continued. All of you. Chloe's eyes widened. Grandma. Don't, Grandma said softly. Not today. Evelyn's voice cracked. You're choosing her over your own family. Grandma looked at me, then back at her. I'm choosing the person who has been a family to me. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She turned, stormed into the house, and began yanking drawers open. Thomas followed silently. Chloe trailed behind her, face pale. The next hour unfolded like a muted film. Boxes slamming shut, suitcases being dragged, feet pounding down the stairs, the rip of packing tape, doors opening and closing. I stood near the front door, watching without speaking. For the first time in my life, they moved around me, not through me, not over me, not because of me, just away from me. When they finally carried the last bag outside, Evelyn paused on the porch. Her eyes were red, not from guilt, but from disbelief. This isn't over, she hissed, but even she didn't believe her own words. Grandma closed the door behind them with a calm, final click. No slam, no triumph, just closure. Cold, quiet, complete. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, letting the quiet settle around me. For years, that quiet had been something Evelyn used against me, her favorite punishment, the space where I was meant to shrink, apologize, disappear. But here in this house with that door finally closed behind her, the silence felt different. It belonged to me. Through the window, I watched their car pull away, Evelyn gripping the steering wheel too tightly, Thomas staring straight ahead, Chloe curled in the back seat like the world had betrayed her. Not once did any of them look back. I didn't expect them to. They had never looked at me unless they wanted something. I walked through the house slowly, touching nothing, just letting my footsteps echo in the newly reclaimed space. The walls seemed to breathe differently without them, lighter, almost relieved. The living room no longer felt like a place I tiptoed through. The kitchen didn't feel like a battlefield. Even the air seemed clearer. Grandma appeared beside me holding 2 mugs of tea. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She didn't say, "I'm proud of you." She just handed me the cup and stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, looking at the empty driveway through the window. "That was overdue," she said softly. "I know," I whispered. We drank our tea in silence, both of us anchored in a moment we had earned, not through shouting or revenge, but through truth and paperwork, through boundaries drawn with ink and signatures instead of anger. Later, I opened the back door and stepped into the small garden. The air smelled like lavender and wet soil. Grandma's plants swayed gently in the breeze, soft, resilient, unbothered by storms that had already passed. I sat on the wooden steps and breathed in. For the first time in years, the breath didn't catch in my throat. Inside the house was quiet. But it was a quiet I chose. A quiet that didn't demand anything from me. A quiet that felt like a starting point, not an ending. Evelyn had always believed I would land somewhere. She just never imagined that somewhere would be here in the home she thought she'd inherit, standing beside the one person who had never erased me. When their car disappeared down the street, the house exhaled quiet, steady mine. I stood in the doorway holding the keys my grandmother placed in my hand, wondering how long it had been since silence felt like safety. For years, I thought surviving meant staying small, staying quiet. But the truth was simple. The day they walked out was the first day I finally walked in. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after being erased, you're not alone. Share your story below, subscribe for more cold family tales, and stay with me until the next chapter drops.